Hi, welcome to another dose of virtual vitamin Z. My name is Stephen, and I'm the curator of humane education for the Detroit Zoological Society. Today, we are going to be continuing to think about systems thinking, and I was told that for this episode, I should have a more catchy title. So I'm going to call this one Return of the Systems Map, and I'll explain what that means in a little bit. But first of all, let's look at the terms we're going to be reviewing and then some new terms as well. So we're going to be reviewing the terms ecosystem, system characteristics, and so on. And then the two new terms we're going to learn are leverage point and connected circles map. So let's get started by reviewing what is a system. And so a system is a whole composed of interconnected parts. And one example of a system is an ecosystem, which is an area and all of the living and non-living beings in that area and the interconnections among them, like Yellowstone National Park, for example. And systems have several characteristics like causality. One part, if it changes, can have an effect on another part and other parts. Interconnectedness, the system is brought together by these connected cause and effect chains. And then emergence, because of that, systems will have properties that the individual parts of the system don't. So a system is greater than the sum of its parts, or 1 + 1 can equal 3. And systems thinking is the ability to recognize systems and their characteristics in the world around you. So again, here's a quick example of a system through a game. Let's see if I can get that started. So in this game, we have 3 people trying to stand between the other 2 and stay 6 feet apart. And whenever one part of the system moves, the other parts have to move too. That's an example of interconnectedness. And a system map is a way of visualizing a system and its parts and the relationships among them. So this is a way of mapping that game's system, part A, B, C, and then a relationship A, B, A, C, and B, C. So why does systems thinking matter? Well, as humane individuals, we want to do the most good and least harm for people, animals, and nature. But because we're part of systems, our actions can have these interconnected consequences, distant consequences, and long-term consequences. So systems thinking will help us understand all of these consequences, which in turn helps us do the most good and the least harm. So here's an example of the connection between fast food meals and beached whales. We might not think it, but when we go get a fast food meal and say we get a disposable cup with a plastic lid and a plastic straw, if we don't dispose of that properly, or even maybe if we do, that plastic can end up in the ocean because of the systems we're a part of. And whales might consume that plastic, and that can make them really sick and even cause them to die. And that's what happens in a lot of cases when people find beached whales on beaches. Their stomachs are full of plastic, and they've died because of that. So one of the ways that systems maps can help us is they can help us visualize these really big systems that we're a part of, and also notice points of those systems that we can do something about. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, return of the systems map, or what is a leverage point and why do they matter? So a leverage point, it's a metaphor based upon a physical, a simple machine called a lever. And a leverage point is a part of a system at which a small change can have a large impact. And so if we can start identifying leverage points, we can determine which of our actions will most efficiently do the most good and least harm for people, animals, and nature. And one way to do that is to determine which parts of a system have the most relationships or most connections with other parts. So here's an example of the lever as a simple machine. And this is the fulcrum here. And the effort we put on one side has a result on the other side. However, if we move that fulcrum closer to the result, we can put in less effort and get the same result. Or if we put in the same amount of effort, we can get a greater result. And so we can think about which parts of a system will allow us to put in less effort and get the same result, or the same amount of effort and get a greater result. And in this case, if we think about fast food and whales, one leverage point is that point where we get a soda with that plastic lid and straw. And it's really hard to go and clean up all of the plastic that's in the ocean, especially because it can travel a long ways. And it might be really hard to help a beached whale once they're already sick. And it might be really hard to make changes to certain other parts of this system. But one thing we can do is we can either avoid getting or using straws, or we can bring reusable cups or things like that. And so that's a simple action. It doesn't take a lot of effort to avoid using those single-use plastics, but it can have a big effect if we all do it together. And so today I want to show you how you can start identifying leverage points in other systems and how you can use that to take action to do the most good and least harm. And to do this, you'll just need a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil. And what you're going to do is you're going to choose a system and write it at the top of the paper. And I'll show you examples of this in just a sec. And then you're going to draw a circle below the system and write as many parts of the system as you can on that circle, and then draw arrows connecting those parts or lines connecting those parts. And then review your completed connected circles map and highlight the parts that have the most arrows, because these either might be themselves leverage points or might be really close to leverage points. So here's an example. Let's say that the topic today is sustainable transportation. Transportation that minimizes its impact on the environment and other animals and our use of resources like fossil fuels. So you draw that at the top and then you draw a circle. It doesn't need to be a perfect circle. And then you draw all of the different parts you can think of. So I thought of buses, bikes, electric cars, carpooling, and so on, all the way around the circle. And then you can draw lines between any two parts that are somehow connected. So for example, I drew a line between buses and bus lines. I drew a line between bikes and bike lanes and things like that. And once you've drawn as many of those lines as you can think of, you want to look around to see which of these points, which we can call nodes, has the most lines or connections. And in this case, the 2 points or the 2 nodes that had the most connections were convenience and public support. So if we're going to be making our transportation system more sustainable, it needs to be convenient for people, because it's really hard to bike if there are no bike lanes, or it's really hard to take the bus if you have to get on 3 different buses and spend 2 hours to get to work in the morning. And another really important part is public support, because if we are going to make changes to the infrastructure so that it is more convenient, we need public support for that. We need people to be voicing their support for doing things like putting in bike lanes or adding bus lines or bus stops. So here's an example. This is a photograph from the city of Portland, and you can see that there's this bike box, a bike lane and a bike box. And I will say, as someone who bikes to work, I'm much more comfortable biking on roads when there are bike lanes, and especially when there are these bike boxes that make me feel more safe at intersections. So that's an example of how it's not necessarily that people don't want to bike or they don't want to take the bus or otherwise participate in a sustainable transportation system. It just needs to be convenient and possible. And so that's a way in which identifying these leverage points can help us make change, rather than encouraging people to make personal changes that can be really either inconvenient or possibly, impossible for them to make. Like, you can't ride the bus if the bus doesn't come to your area. So what are some actions we can start taking to help participate in this more sustainable transportation system? You don't need any supplies for this. And here are a couple of tips. One tip is to think about your own individual leverage points, because all of us, we might all share some of the same systems, but we also all live in different systems. So identify your own individual leverage points. For example, maybe you don't have the money to purchase an electric car, or you don't have a bike, or there's not really good bike infrastructure near you. But maybe you can try taking the bus 1 day per week, or try carpooling 1 day per week. Not necessarily doing it every day, but just doing it a little bit, and that might be enough. That might have a pretty big impact. And also think about identifying your community's leverage points. So maybe you can't ride the bus because there's no bus lines near you. But what you can do is you can encourage your community to improve its public transportation infrastructure by creating more bus lines. If the community doesn't know that people want them, it's unlikely that they will be created. So those are just a couple of tips as you think about identifying leverage points and taking actions based upon what you find. And so that leads me back to the Detroit Zoological Society and our Berman Academy for Humane Education, which has the mission of helping people help animals. And I hope that by learning more about systems thinking, and today in particular about leverage points, that you feel more empowered to take actions that will help yourself, help animals, and help the environment and help other people. So thanks so much for joining me. Until next time, if you're interested in more virtual vitamin Z, be sure to check out our website at detroitzoo.org and click on the education tab and the link for virtual vitamin Z. Until then, stay safe and have a great day. Bye.